I forced myself to read lessons in chemistry, and since TikTok doesn't let me like just complain for forever, I'm gonna put this on YouTube and I can complain for a much longer time because I hated this book. I did not like it. I hated it. Lessons in Chemistry is about Elizabeth Zott, who is a chemist. It sort of starts in the future when her daughter is in first grade and then skips back through time to when she's at a job, then skips back through time sort of to when she was trying to get her PhD, master's degree, one of those two, and then skips various places. It kind of does several third points of view, including a dog's point of view. And so one thing that you have to know about this book is all good characters are geniuses, including the dog. The dog is a genius. Her little daughter is a genius. The person she loves is a genius. And of course, she is a genius. And if any character has a major flaw, they are not a genius. They got their position by being jerks and stealing things. Take the reason that she does not have her PhD graduate degree. Graduate degree. That is because the person that she was basically trying to get it from, she was working with the teacher. He would get undergraduates, they would write papers, and then he would maybe change a few things here and there, and then he would slap his name on it and he would put it out in the world and say, this is mine. And since the school got a lot of like funding and money because it looked like he was putting out a lot of stuff, they looked away as he did it and he got away with it. So she's working with someone who's actually kind of, an idiot. She's one night working in the laboratory. She finds something wrong. She brings it up to him. She's like, he's like, you're such a whatever, because she has that quirky kind of I don't get people personality, which I have that kind of personality. I could actually see myself a lot in her, which I think actually drove me nuts. It wasn't that I was ever into chemistry. I was more into physics, which I never followed through into because I can't do math. But I could see myself in her socially, because I did not get a lot of the social things that she was not getting, which I think is why I didn't get half the jokes in this. Anyways, he's getting annoyed with her because she's not acting like a girl like she should, and he basically just tries to grape her, and she stabs him. When the police come, they ask her if she wants to give a testimony of regret for what she did. She says, no, he was trying to assault me, and they basically, everything's her fault. She was failing. She tried to seduce him, and when he said no, she was violent towards him, and she gets kicked out of the school. Despite this, she does become a chemist, and she starts working at this place, and she works under another guy who you learn is a complete jerk and wishes that she would basically work under him. And well, he starts by basically just being annoyed that she's a woman and she won't do things like fetch coffee and other things that, women, even if they're in a position of power, if they're often expected to do for men, like be a team player, fetch the coffee, do little secretarial things, even if you're not a secretary, and that kind of stuff. Or even intern things. Because she's a no-nonsense, I want to get blown up kind of person, she goes past science and say there is an experiment in progress and goes and gets some beakers from Calvin Evans, who is this really smart man who basically works independently within this place that she works because he's already been in papers and received rewards, so he gets a lot of independent, funding for them. He obviously just put up the sign so he doesn't get bothered. He says, I can't give you beakers. I want all the beakers. And she goes, I need the beakers. We've been asking for beakers for forever. I keep filling out all the forms, which isn't even my job. He's like, well, they shouldn't send secretaries up to do this job. That isn't nice of them. She's like, I don't, jerk. Takes 20 beakers, heads downstairs, says, I got these. They're like, you can't just take things from Calvin Evans. And she's like, whatever, I got the beakers. And as I'm saying this, that sounds really funny. But the way it's written is just really annoying. I don't know. Mostly it's because I think it's interspersed with like how these characters are written. They're just so flat and two-dimensional. They're just so much like, oh, she's she just did this, and then all of the people were total witches and jerks towards her, and she was just doing the right thing. And I'm like, can we at least have one person on our side? I know that the friend character could be totally annoying, but we need one friend character who's on our side, please. Well, after some mishaps and things that happen, they end up going out and being on dates. And eventually he ends up proposing to her, which they do not agree to. He says, she goes, what did you talk doing this? In the book, they have actually talked about this and said that she told him that he doesn't want to marry her. The thing is, that's all it says in the book, because the book will just skip ahead lines and lines and lines and just focus on little moments within their story, because it's covering years and years within this little itty bitty sliver of time. That's why I think all the characters are characters of actual characters. Anyways, he proposes, she says no, because she doesn't want to get married. And then she finally gives the audience all the reasons why she doesn't want to get married. And all of the reasons are practical reasons why you don't want to get married. As a chemist, as someone who wants to get published, as a woman, which is, yeah, all your stuff gets shoved under the name of the man. Like, I didn't do it. My husband did it. My name gets lost. His name gets brought up. That stuff. And I was like, yes, that was all the reasons. I thought she was just saying no to this guy and not like elaborating. And it was a good moment, because I was like, oh, Evan's actually, like, yeah, he gets to actually progress as a human being. And but it's so quick with everything that by the time it feels like they're progressing as humans, you've gone on to the next scene. Like, they're talking, she's like, oh no, he's talking about wanting to have a baby, and then all of a sudden, I want to have a dog. And I'm like, and then all of a sudden, argument over. And I know arguments can end like that, but they do come up over and over again, but you never get enough of the domestic parts of their lives to really feel that, to really feel how their lives intertwine together and how they continue to have this conversation, this back and forth, this feeling of connection. And this is for all of the book. You don't feel it for any of these people. Once again, take it that jerk of a boss that she works underneath. He only starts to take an real interest in her when she starts going out with Evans, because Evans is above him. He has oh my god, I have to talk about this. Anyways, he has a hatred of Evans because when they were in college, Evans went to Cambridge, I think, and he went to Harvard, and Harvard had said no to Evans going on their school. Anyways, so basically Evans had been kind of a jerk when they won. Like, he said something and he was right about it because they were all drunk, but of course this guy takes it very personally. And not only is this guy not very good at chemistry, he also has a wife. He has a very traditional marriage. They're popping out kids. And of course he cheats, and he's like, oh, but all men cheat. Like, that's just a thing we do. But that's okay. I return to my wife at the end of the day, and all I'm gonna do is I'm going to take her away from Evans and make her my woman, and then I'm gonna drop her. The way he starts doing this, of course, is by calling her stupid. Like, not even being subtle about it. He just says, you're not very smart, over and over and over again. Or the main antagonist woman within this story, which is the secretary, Frost, who just sort of glares at her behind her back and starts rumors behind her back and is just sort of cattish and hissy, and when she finally feels like she has a moment, she makes like little stabby stabs. Anyways, they get a dog. They name that dog the time they meet him, I think. His name's like 6:30. I think his name is 6:30. And it is a genius dog. She teaches it all sorts of things. It used to be a bomb sniffer, but it wasn't very good. So the police officer that had it drove it and dropped it in a muck in the ditch and basically said, I don't want you anymore. You're horrible. Goodbye. Because everyone who is not the genius is a horrible, horrible person. And then, because apparently this is more important than starting to establish a backing for how she is going to become a feminist icon that the book wants her to be, and giving her a, an actual background of people to help her through a situation. And, you know, I don't know, a lot of people who can be there later when she is being a cook and all of those things, and maybe can like pull against some of her ideas, but then be for her there in other places. No, instead we get a lot on rowing, because as I said, the husband was really into rowing, and it said at the beginning, if you know rowers, there's like one thing you need to know about rowing, they'll never shut up about rowing. And I'm like, oh God, this person is a rower, and she's never gonna shut up about rowing in this book. And I was right. So he teaches her how to row, so this person can talk all about rowing in this book. And it's a way to bring her together with people that will only be relevant, really, when she's rowing. They were relevant in one other spot, but it could have been so much more relevant to bringing in people who could be there and be supportive of her and start talking about how she can form a cohesive group of people, on how to be like there for her when she needs people in her life. But no, they're only there for one part, and everything else is just like her only, because we have to be American. We have to be all about one person who can lift everyone out of life and make everyone independent and Anyways, a new leash law gets enacted eventually, and since she's worried about the dog and the dog getting taken and locked up probably, she says to the husband, when you go on your runs with the dog, put him on a leash. So one day, he puts the dog on a leash, he goes for a run. The police, who have cut budgets, have a car that's faulty, the car backfires and hits him in the head, and he dies. No more lover. It's all very tragic. We're all very sad. And when she is going through with everyone being not so, you know, sorry for her anymore at her workplace, they're basically like, oh, well, we made accommodations to let 630 into the place, because Charles Evans was very, you know, lucrative for us, but we're not going to let you bring the dog to work with you now. The witchy lady from before comes and sees that she's throwing up and realizes, oh, you're pregnant. And you know, she's all witchy about it because they weren't married. So this is a pregnancy out of wedlock. Oh, how scandalous. And I have to say, this is one of the times where it actually felt like 1950s, because everything else, like the misogyny, even the teacher that got a little gropey, kind of felt like it could happen during this time. And I was like, yeah, I could see a teacher being even kind of followed up by the school if they wanted to cover their butts, like the school going, ooh, let's support the teacher instead of the student because we don't want to get in trouble. Like, that sounds like a plausible enough reason. Let's just try and sweep it all underneath the rug. Other things, like you can get that boss that the other one that she had that has a traditional marriage and is trying to, like, is jealous of the upper guy, so he tries to seduce you and is very misogynistic about it. And even her being in a STEM, you know, area, and it's mostly taken over by guys with women secretaries. And the way it was written, I actually thought that there were women chemists in there at first, because I was like, oh, it sounds like there's some women chemists in there with her. And it wouldn't have surprised me, because I remember my grandmother at least talking about where I don't think she would do the actual things, but she would recreate the same chemical reactions and do like little lab things with her not her undergraduate degree. Anyways, she does get fired. Basically, they're all smug about it and forget that, oh yeah, we have a huge donor who who wants us to look into specifically what she's looking into, but we'll just fire her because we're vindictive a-holes. So they do. She has no job. She makes her kitchen into a lab, and eventually she becomes so pregnant that she has to like actually go see a doctor about it. But at first she was like, when she goes to the doctor, she's like, yeah, I just thought it would take care of itself. And the book is like, yeah, in the 1950s, there were no other options. And I'm like, okay, there were no legal options for her to have an abortion, but she's a chemist? I know that's not biology, but it's chemistry. And also, if she wanted to go see somebody, there were options. They're just not legal at this time. And she seems pretty pragmatic. Does she actually care about legal? I don't know. I would have seen it more like getting caught in her grief would be more of an excuse than I thought it would be like taken care of by what? You going urge all the time? Were you more rowing stuff? And that's all I'm going to say on the book, because I feel like that gives you everything you need to know up to where it started you at the beginning. And that's what I generally do with my synopsis wraparounds. I just sort of give you to a point and then I let you read from there if you are interested in. And that was the point I feel like wrapped you right to the beginning. You might find those spoilery, but that's just kind of how I do synopsises. Anyways, yeah, this book is so frustrating to me. One of the problems is that I don't find any of the humor funny. The way it's written, the way the characters are written, it's not quirky to me. It's just, it hits dull every time. There are literally places where I was going, like for pages going, where's the funny? Where is it? Someone said this was witty. I missed it. Where's the witty? Where's the funny? I have to say I only really read this because I put this on TikTok saying that I read the prologue and it annoyed me. I didn't realize the first chapter was actually the first chapter. It reads like a prologue to me because it is set in the future and then it bumps back and it's set what feels like to me the daughter's point of view and then goes to the mother's point of view. So I was like, oh, it's the prologue, and then I actually read the chapters. I'm like, oh, it's chapter 1. But also it's about the daughter, and it gives her, like, not only is she a genius, she's a stereotypical genius who apparently is not stereotypical because she reads at a young age and everyone can read eventually. And I'm like, A, reading is one of the first signs you're a genius. Thank you. Another thing, stop having geniuses start reading Dickens really early. What is this, Matilda? Cut it out. Then, as I said, even their dog is a genius. And the fact that all geniuses are inherently good, and anyone who is as I said, and there's no nuance here. There's no like, oh, the professor was a genius, but he was also a super creep, or the guy she works for is also really smart in this area, but he wasn't as smart as her in her given area, so he had to steal her work. No, he was always a dunderhead, and he had to steal other people's work, like her work, and that's how he got ahead. Like, it's always, if you're smart, you know what I'm talking about, and if you're not, you just don't. It also had this, as I said, feeling of being, there's just one person has to stand out, and everything will be okay. It's not that there needs to be a whole group behind you and you need to have a whole movement behind you in order to get things going. It's like this person really bought into like the whole just one person like Rosa Parks sitting on a bus and everybody just going with that. They didn't realize how much, yes, that was actually kind of a publicity stunt. And sometimes I wonder if people like that, if they realized if it was sort of a publicity stunt, if they would think it was less of a huge thing, even though it was a bit of a publicity stunt. Like, yeah, of course it was a publicity stunt, but it was powerful. It was brought up in a way that made it really like, brought us together as like the nation and brought people together. And once again, like we always talk about like all these people through time, but they had a lot of people backing them and being in their corner in order to prop them up and give them speeches and stuff. Like, yeah, we all love them, but they had people there to support them. That, and half the time she doesn't explain herself, because once again, she's quirky, everyone should just know what I know kind of feeling to it. And sometimes it feels like it doesn't allow for any room, so you don't know if when she says, well, because there's that one point where there's one woman who writes, I don't want to eat meat because I feel a little weird about eating living things, and she replies, well, technically, you know, vegetables are living things and we eat them too. And I'm like, okay, I'm not a vegetarian, but are we supposed to take this as a moment where she could grow from she could understand the nuances of somebody realizing the differences between a plant and a animal. Like, please. Like, are we going to then take, oh, humans are living too, to that extreme? And obviously there's a difference there, but please. It's just, it's like almost like, oh, I thought this all out, and you're like, but I can poke holes in this, so please, no you didn't. I'm not completely finishing my thoughts here, but headache, sorry. I don't know, it's kind of like when they were talking about why she didn't want to get married. And at first they just put a blanket, she didn't want to get married, and I was just like, well, did she talk about, like, they should actually talk about it so he understands her thinking, and they should have a discussion about this because they're in this together. No, she shouldn't be forced to marry because there are legitimate reasons for especially a woman to not want to get married. And then he could give counter arguments and all that kind of stuff. And yes, eventually you just have to stop the conversation, but you should have the conversation because you are in a relationship together, right? Not that he can force her into to have the marriage. I'm just saying, if you're in a relationship, have the conversation. But then it turned out they had the conversation. She had brought up certain points. It does sound like she cuts off the conversation at a certain point because she gets sick of it, instead of letting him have a talk and bring up his own part of it. But at least it sounds like they have had part of the conversation back and forth. But then it'll bring up something like contraception and say, I was on contraception. I'm like, what kind of contraception? You're in the 1950s. What kind of contraception are you on? Are you on contraception plus, like, following how your period works? I know that doesn't always work. That's not 100% perfect, but giving me a little bit more to work with would actually give me a little bit more to know what in the world were your countermeasures, were your things, it just feels like sometimes there were not enough details for me to feel like this is a fleshed out world, a fleshed out person, a fleshed out conversation about gender, about anything. As I said, lots of the characters felt like caricatures, even the characters that are supposed to grow as people as you read the book. It's just, like, even the conversation she had about religion as an atheist, I was looking at them and going, this is so surface level. Then maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's that the book feels so incredibly surface level. And one of those, yeah, empowerment. And I'm like, empowerment with no nuance. It's one of those books that kicks its protagonist down so you can feel bad about them, so you can feel that much better when they pick themselves up again. Like, not because it's realistic, like, they try to put in realistic situations, obviously, but it's less about doing the real work that goes into these situations and more about, oh, that happened to me once, but look at her go. Look at her get up and go, and look at the world that she created. Just her. Girl boss moment. Girl boss. I wish that there was someone like this in the world. I wish I could be her. And I just don't think I'm into those narratives. At least not the way it's put in this book. Because I have read some books where I'm like, yeah, I want to be this person. I would love to be that person. But A, I think that person actually needs to be angry at the whole entire world. I like being angry. And B, I don't think it can be this easy. And because change, A, is not that easy. And people's mindsets are not so easily just changed by one person and by this kind of... It's just, this almost paints an almost dangerous picture of how it could change, I would say. As I said, it's empowerment, but it's like candy empowerment. Like, you shouldn't eat too much of it. If you do eat this, then you should go for the more substantial stuff after it. in order to give your feeling of empowerment some actual grit and substance behind it. Anyways, those are my feelings behind Lessons in Chemistry. Don't know if anyone agrees with me. I'm sure a lot of people disagree with me. And that's that. Bye everyone. Happy reading.